Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whenever you should happen to find this. This is the Quote of Arms podcast. I am Jay Rowe, your host with the most, also known as the Unsummoned Skull. I'm here with
Hamburger Time,
Nice.
aka Tyler Burger.
So Tyler Burger. Hamburger Time is my helper today. Hamburger helper. So today we are talking about
The best tribe in Magic, Slivers,
like
everyone's favorite.
Like the kind you get in your thumb when you're playing with a piece of wood.
Only more annoying.
Okay. So, who are these little guys?
Well, Slivers are they're a tribe that's very focused, probably more focused on synergy, I think, than any other tribe in Magic. So maybe elves. They're a set of creatures that each have an ability that they grant to every other sliver. So you'll have, for example, Winged Sliver. All slivers have flying. Without that, just in a vacuum, this guy has flying, but the moment you play a second sliver, that one also gains flying, then the next one, and the next one. And then they'll all have abilities that they will grant to each other as well. So,
do you use any of the newer slivers?
I definitely use actually all the slivers. I can get into that explanation in a little bit.
Before we get too deep, I was just trying to differentiate them. You mentioned that the wing sliver gives it to all slivers.
Yes. So in the early days of Magic, the first slivers that were made, not to be confused with the card called the first sliver, by the way. The first slivers that were made, they all had the abilities that they granted these abilities to every sliver, and that included your opponents. And the intent was that from the lore perspective, slivers, they have a hive mind, and they can basically sense each other, and they're shapeshifters. And so when one has a certain ability, they all grant that ability when they're within each other's vicinity.
Not shapeshifters in the Magic term, though.
No, they're not shapeshifters in the creature type, but they are shapeshifters, like, in terms of their biology.
Okay.
So, yeah, older slivers, they granted this ability, whatever abilities they had, to all slivers, and that included your opponents. Once M14 happened, the Magic design was on the stance that this created too confusing of board states, where you had to track your stuff and your opponent's stuff all on one creature, and I kind of disagree with that, but that's not up to me to decide. So, starting at M14, all of the slivers now have the abilities that they give it only to the slivers you control.
I think that change happened around the same time as the legend rule changed, such that my board doesn't impact your board in terms of the type line. Because there was an issue for a while.
Yeah, that does sound around. Yeah, I think that was around that same time period, you're right.
There's the issue where the only way to beat Jace the Mind Sculptor was to play the 3-mana Jace.
Yeah, that was a thing, is that people started playing planeswalkers to kill each other's planeswalkers, and people were using clone as a kill spell. And people, Magic design was like, we want you to be cloning stuff because it's cool to clone stuff, not because it's a 4-mana kill spell.
Also, it seems really weird that your deck, which represents your thoughts and memories, somehow interferes with someone else's thoughts and memories.
Mm-hmm. That too, yeah. So, I guess I get from a design perspective, they decided, you know what, yeah, your own stuff, it's just, based on what you have. But unfortunately, it has the side effect of now you have some slivers that do a certain thing in a certain way, granting it to every sliver, and then you have some other slivers that only affect your own side. So it does get occasionally slightly confusing if there are multiple slivers on the battlefield, or if there's maybe a changeling, but usually it's not too big of a problem. So that is what they are mechanically. Lore-wise, they are these sort of serpenty, kind of alien-looking animals. They all have one arm with a claw on it, and they have a forked tail, and they have these kind of pointy heads with, from what I can tell, no mouths or eyes that are visible. Except on Muscle Sliver, he has like weird teeth.
Yeah, it's funny that you're saying that they're alien looking because the ones that have the different templating, where they're talking about only your board, are kind of predator looking.
Yes, that is the thing. Is starting in M14, that same time where they changed the way that the effects worked, they decided we're going to make these like humanoid slivers that had evolved separately on the plane of Chandelar, and they look definitely more along the lines of the Predator. So it's kind of fun. You have a little Alien versus Predator thing going on.
Yeah.
There was a lot of backlash to that. People didn't like the humanoid ones. I personally am not a fan, although I would say I probably don't hate them as much as some people hate them. I definitely prefer the original cool style,
Yeah.
though. Long, snaky bodies and these, like, just, I don't know, something about them. Like, when they're humanoid, it just doesn't have that same magic to me.
The same magic?
Yeah, that same gathering.
There we go. I should mention we're not officially funded. But whatever. Just think about that product placement, Wizards. Maybe one day. Anyways. So, you mentioned the concept of a hive mind. Can you describe that?
So, in the original lore, all of the Slivers, they have this hive mind, which is basically they all share sort of a singular goal, a singular mindset. None of them think individually for themselves. They all are under the direction of the Sliver Queen. In the story, the Queen is held captive by Volrath, and there's this whole thing where he's been experimenting on them, and nobody even knows where they're from. Like, their original plane is just completely a mystery. Volrath kind of took them to his place and was using them as a weapon. And throughout the events of the story, the Sliver Queen ends up getting killed tragically. Is the worst thing that's ever happened. And most of the Slivers all die in that event too, but that's a separate story because they end up coming back.
Well, of course, as long as there's a sliver of hope.
You stop that. And so, yeah, they have the Queen, and the Queen is the only one who has like any kind of a mind of her own, and she directs the movements and the intentions of the swarm, as it were. And then later on in the story, when the Queen and all the Slivers are killed, 100 years later, there's something called the Riptide Project, and they very foolishly were like, hey, look, we found these like sliver fossils or sliver remains. I bet we could weaponize this. And so they brought them back to life.
Why does it sound like Jurassic Park?
It's definitely the same theme of don't mess with forces you don't understand. Because what happens is that they didn't understand the sliver biology and understand that they need a queen to direct them. So what happens is they go insane. Like, they start just rampaging over everything, and they are this horrible, crazy menace.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, most of them die again throughout, because there's a big whole magical explosion that creates Corona, and there's all kinds of stuff going on in that story. But some of them still survive. And that's where we get the Sliver Overlord. Some of them fuse together into that thing. So they do not have a hive, let me rephrase that. They have a hive mind, but with no queen to actually direct it. But what happens is it looks like, if you look at the flavor text of Sliver Legion, that the hive mind itself is possibly becoming self-aware. And we don't know where that story is going from that point. That's kind of just left open to interpretation.
Yeah, I've been trying to sneak in the whole life finds a way line.
That's definitely what happened. Is they made them. The Riptide Project brings them back, and then in the story, as I understand it, I haven't actually been able to read the story myself, but I know from like wikis and stuff. Can't find the books, unfortunately. But anyways, what happens is the Brood Sliver, which is in the card game, whenever a Sliver does damage, you make that many Sliver tokens, So literally, like Jurassic Park, they start breeding.
They're breeding.
All of the slivers in my deck are female. Life finds a way.
Yep. Oy. Yeah.
I like that you brought up Jurassic Park, though. It's one of my favorite movies.
Dun, dun,
Big Michael Crichton fan.
dun, 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 dun. Oh, that movie scared the crap out of me when I was younger.
I know that was my childhood.
I saw it in first grade.
Oh, yeah. I would have been around that age. Definitely.
So my sister and I saw it with my parents because my parents are like, "Oh, look, it's a movie about dinosaurs, and Jeremy loves dinosaurs."
They didn't think to look into it any more than that. Like, why is it rated PG-13? Don't worry about it.
Yeah, my sister and I ran out of the room screaming at the same scene for different reasons. It was
Which scene was this?
when the guy went out of the guy was with the two kids, and he went out of the car and went into the bathroom and got eaten by the T-Rex on the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, for my sister, she was about 3 years older than me, so she was in about fourth grade. So she's still at the age where she believes that adults have kids' best interests at heart, and they would protect kids even if they're not the parents. So she's like, how could an adult do this to kids? How could he leave the kids alone when there's a T-Rex?
So she wasn't upset that this man had been just eaten. She was upset that he was a bad person.
Yes. Meanwhile, I was in first grade. It was not that far removed from being potty trained. And I saw a guy in the most vulnerable position he could possibly be in. Pants by his ankles, getting the T-Rex reaching in. And basically at that point, there's not much you can do but resign yourself to what's going to happen. You can try to open up the door and shuffle off completely undignified, but you're still going to get eaten, and you're just going to be embarrassed when that happens. And so, to first grade me, I basically got reverse potty trained. Because I'm like, there is no more dangerous position or vulnerable position to be in.
The bathroom is supposed to be safe.
I would rather just go in my pants than go while I'm going.
Oh, that's too funny.
Yeah, I didn't think this was a comedy show, did you?
I mean, hey, if we want to talk about dinosaurs instead of slivers, I've got a dinosaur deck. I can go on about that topic instead, but I prepared for slivers today.
Oh yeah, we're supposed to be talking about things that are still living, not fossilized. Anyways. Yeah, it's a topic for another day.
I'll be back to talk about dinosaurs next time. Just kidding.
Yeah,
well, maybe in the future.
Oh, absolutely. We'll have to make sure we start that one by saying, "Clever girl." You found your way back here.
Beautiful, clever girl.
You found your way back onto the show, eh? Clever girl.
Fun fact, final topic on Jurassic Park. The novel, man, if you haven't read Jurassic Park, if you're a fan of that movie, read Jurassic Park. Do yourself a favor. It is so good. Very different, I will say.
Yeah.
The themes are all the same.
Yeah.
The themes are definitely the same, but the characters are largely different. For example, Muldoon, the hunter that says clever girl, totally different. I love him in that book.
I mean, both of them are pretty awesome, but they're very different characters.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm a fan of both. I'm just saying, if you haven't read Jurassic Park, highly recommend it. That goes to the viewers and to you. But it sounds like you've read it.
Yeah. Yeah, English teacher's gonna read. So, you mentioned that they give a variety of different abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Are they aggressively costed?
They can be. There are a ton of low-costed slivers. There's definitely a few higher-costed ones. All the legendaries cost Wooburg. They're all 5. And there's a few that are 5 or 6 mana, or even 4 mana, but at least half of them, and most of the good ones, are in that 1, 2, and 3 mana range. They're very low to the ground, easy to get going, and that's very important when, depending on the commander in question, you want to be usually casting multiple a turn. Not only because of literally how they play, you want to have multiples out to get those abilities going, but also because, depending on your commander, you have the first Sliver, which cascades. So casting extra spells every turn means you get more value. Hive Lord gives all of them indestructible, so the more you can put out there, the more that his effect is just going to start applying and keep them all protected. Legion is a coat of arms. It's just big, giant stat buff, so the more you put out there, the bigger they are. And then Overlord, he doesn't really do anything for casting multiples, but his effect is that you search your library for a Sliver and put it in your hand. He has a second effect, but that's irrelevant here. So by the 3 mana to do that, you want to have low-costed Slivers so you can actually then cast those Slivers the same turn that you search them out. And then there's Sliver Queen. She doesn't do anything with the Slivers, but she makes tokens. So the more tokens you make, the more that they can all take advantage of the other effects. So every one of the legends, you want to be playing a lot of Slivers to get the most out of those effects.
So we're talking about traditional types of creatures and interactions. Would you say that there are some that are offensive and some that are defensive?
Definitely true. The majority are offensive. You've got things that are like Gale Rider Sliver granting flying, Cloud Shredder Sliver giving flying and haste. You've got Heart Sliver that gives haste. Like there's multiple hasters, multiple flyers. You've got Venom Sliver giving Death Touch. Necrotic Sliver lets you sacrifice a Sliver to destroy any permanent. You can stat buffs with Legion, Magma Sliver, Muscle Sliver. Oh, there's a lot of lords that give either +1/+1, +2, +3. So definitely a lot of offensive ones. I could go on and on about offensive skills, but there's a few defensive ones too. There's a few utility ones also. Defensive-wise, you've got Crystalline Sliver, gives them all Shroud.
Oh, that one.
Crystalline's one of my favorites. I'm a big fan of that one.
That's one of the things that made it a, not a player, but a rogue deck in Legacy.
I can imagine that. Actually, Legacy Slivers is one of those things on my docket to eventually make. I have Slivers currently built in Commander and Pauper. So I want to make them in Modern
as well, yeah.
I want to make them in Modern. Just have it. Mana bases are not cheap, unfortunately. But
Modern, I think
and then I want to make them in Legacy.
Which is also not
there's
cheap.
also that. Yeah, that's also not cheap. Yeah, Crystalline Sliver, Shroud. No targeting any Slivers by anybody, which generally you don't need to target your own Slivers too often. Occasionally, but not often. And then there's other defensive effects. Root Sliver prevents Slivers from being countered, which is a little niche, but definitely welcome. Harmonic Sliver, if a Sliver would die, you have the option to put it on top of your library instead, which is really nice for just getting back a key card, but also if your commander happens to be the first Sliver in particular, you can then cascade into that. So you can set up cascade chains off of it. I
think Harmonic also grants flying.
It does also grant flying, but there's like 4 of them that grant flying, so I wasn't worrying about that part. Hive Lord, again, gives them all indestructible.
I meant that in terms of being both offensive and defensive.
Oh, yes, definitely true. Yeah. Pulmonic, that's one of my favorites. The only reason I don't like Pulmonic is because it looks really stupid.
Oh.
Like, the art is just ugly.
Yeah, it looks kind of lumpy.
It's like a fat tumor marshmallow. Ward Sliver. As it enters play, choose a color, and all Slivers have protection from that color. A lot of various defensive skills like that. And then, like I said, utility also is overlooked. You have Gemhide Sliver and Mana Weft Sliver. They both give all Slivers the ability to tap for any color of mana, which is amazing in a 5-color deck. Not only for fixing your mana, but then for playing more stuff. You've got like Hibernation Sliver, who is low-key, one of my favorites. All Slivers gain pay 2 life and return this creature to its owner's hand, which allows them to dodge destruction. It allows you to get multiple cast triggers off of the first Sliver, which grants Cascade. Things like that. Multiple ETB effects. You have Harmonic Sliver, which destroys artifacts and enchantments whenever a Sliver enters the battlefield.
That's what I remember being used even outside of Sliver decks, because it would be like a cheaper, at least until it got reprinted a few times, a cheaper form of the enchantment that does the same thing whenever any creature
Aura
comes
Shards,
in.
yeah. Yeah, Aura Shards is the enchantment version, which is the exact same mana cost, 1 green and white. Aura Shards is whenever any creature enters, you get that effect. But it's optional, which is extremely powerful. Harmonic Sliver has the downside of it's not optional. You have to destroy something. So sometimes that will come back and bite you. You gotta be careful. Play your stuff in the proper sequencing.
Yeah, when I started playing Commander, I just had a good stuff deck of stuff I used to play in Standard, and just random stuff I happened to own that was in the right colors. The Doran deck, and there was a Sliver player, and so we all we would play 8 to 16 player games, and one of the players there would be the Sliver player, and so we would always pack at least one just random Sliver in your deck as kind of a hedge against it, so that you would get all the abilities that the guy was giving.
That is very funny.
So the one that I would pack, originally it was Brood, and then I realized that didn't work.
Oh, yeah, that's not the best. Because the problem is you got to remember that you're doing that, but you're also granting the Sliver player its abilities.
Yep. So eventually I realized, okay, what if I play Harmonic, and then I can sort of buddy up to that player?
That actually makes a lot of sense, yeah.
The Harmonic gave me a hedge against the player because I get all the abilities he gets, including things like can't be blocked except by Slivers, which there is one that does that.
That's gosh, there's so many that I forget the names.
Blue one.
Yeah, it's a blue shifting Sliver. Thank you. Because I always mix him up, and then there's one that gives Shadow, and I always forget which one is which. This one is shifting Sliver.
Well, Shadow is one that can occasionally just kill you.
Yeah, that's why I don't like him.
Yeah.
He's good. It's definitely very powerful, but I choose not to run him because he can come back to bite you.
Yeah, for people playing blue, that was the blue hedge against him.
So if for those who don't know what Shadow does, it makes it so it cannot be blocked except by other creatures with Shadow, which means generally that just is unblockable because nobody plays Shadow cards. But it also means that it cannot block anything except creatures with Shadow. So now your Slivers can't block.
And in an 8 to 16 player game, there are going to be a few people going before you who can potentially just take you out if they know that you're going to have an army of unblockable creatures.
Yep, exactly. So I don't like that one too much. He's definitely got a home, especially as just like a finisher. And I do like that he's only 3 mana, so he's easy to put down there. But I don't play him.
Yeah. So that's just the thing to remember if you're in a meta that has Slivers and you're trying to figure out, okay, this guy has a deck that's really powerful and they share all these abilities and things just snowball out of control. Well, these are some things that you could do about it.
Also, it's not the best, but I do think it's very funny. While we're on the topic of anti-meta gaming for Slivers, there is one Sliver called Plague Sliver that it's a 4 mana 5/5, which is pretty decent value already. And it has an effect that is all Slivers have the following ability. At the beginning of your upkeep, this creature does 1 damage to you. And so the intent here is that you play this as your only Sliver. You get a 4 mana 5/5 that takes all the abilities that your opponent is giving. And yeah, it's going to do 1 damage to you every upkeep. But then the Sliver player who's trying to drop 10 or more creatures all the time is suddenly going to be taking a lot of damage every upkeep. So this is the one Sliver who's very anti-Sliver, and his flavor text kind of goes with it. It's a Sliver shares everything with its hive, even its afflictions.
Ouch.
That one was pretty fun. That was a time spiral back when they had kind of revitalized Slivers for a short time. So I think it was meant to be like you can draft this guy, or even constructed play this guy, and have this good value body and this fun little bonus effect.
So how does
obviously I don't play that guy.
Oh yeah. So how do Slivers usually win?
So a Sliver deck tends to win in one of two ways. The first one, the way that I prefer, is combat. You're gonna amass this big board of just powerful, good effects, whether it's double strike or trample or anthem effects that are buffing the team up, flying to make them hard to block, or even just completely unblockable, like we said with shifting Sliver there. And you're just gonna put down as much stuff on the board and start swinging away. And usually that's pretty viable as far as I wouldn't say in like a CEDH or anything like that, obviously, but as far as like the average table goes, they're going to be one of the better decks at doing that. They get going fast. All of their commanders are very powerful and very viable. Even the ones that, like, personally, I think Legion is the worst one. Having a coat of arms in the command zone just doesn't seem as powerful as having Cascade or Indestructible or Tutoring. And yet, a Sliver Legion is still extremely dangerous in the command zone, even if I do think he is coincidentally the worst one. So, lots of ways to do that. The other way that they win is combo. This is going to be done in a few different ways. Sliver Queen, in particular, is a combo machine. 2 mana to make a token has crazy value when you pack it with other effects. There's it doesn't even have to be other Slivers. It can be like Ashnod's Altar. You pay 2 mana to make a token, and then you sacrifice that token for 2 mana. You now have infinite enter the battlefield and leave the battlefield triggers. Just right there, 2 cards. You can also do Basal Sliver, which gives all Slivers the effect of sacrifice to add black to your mana pool. So again, same thing, infinite ETBs and deaths, because you just have those tokens instantly kill themselves. And then you add in, there's multiple other ways to then take advantage of it. Even if you go fully Sliver focused, you can do a lot of infinite combos. You can do, for example, the Basal Sliver there that makes the black mana. If you factor in adding Gemhide Sliver that lets them tap for mana, and then any haste enabler, you can make a token, tap it for mana, and then sacrifice it for the black. You've now +1'd on mana, and you just do that infinitely. You now have infinite mana. That you use the infinite mana to make infinite tokens, and you go from there. They all have haste. That's just one way. There's tons of ways to go infinite with Sliver Queen. There's Lava Belly Sliver, where every Sliver ETBs and deals 1 damage to target player or planeswalker, and you gain 1 life. You do that infinitely with the tokens. You gain infinite life and deal infinite damage. And I can go on and on about Sliver Queen combos. There's tons. And then there's also the first Sliver, who, in particular, this isn't typically a Sliver deck per se, but it's a CEDH deck that goes infinite using Food Chain to make infinite mana and then recast the first Sliver over and over to cast your entire deck with Cascade.
Neat.
I don't find that to be terribly interesting personally. It's kind of cool to see, but like when I say I want to play a Sliver deck, I want to actually play Slivers. I don't want to just do this Food Chain combo. So that's not my jam.
Are there Slivers
combo.
Are there Slivers that do alternate win cons?
There are not. No Slivers that do all win cons. There's nothing like a Approach of the Second Sun or anything like that.
There is Poisonous, and there is a is Virulent, I believe.
Yes, Virulent Sliver does have poison. You know what? I completely forgot about that one for a second. I guess I wasn't thinking of. I was thinking of effects that like say win the game. I wasn't thinking about poison.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's how I
virulent
lose
gives.
again.
Yeah, you're right. That one gives them all poisonous one, which is most people know what infect does, but a lot of people don't realize that poison is the precursor to that. So what poisonous does is only when it hits a player with combat damage, they get one poison counter. It doesn't matter how much damage you're doing; they only get the one poison counter. But if you can give them 10 poison counters, they lose. So you just got to hit them 10 times with anything, and you got it.
Actually, so with double strike, it counts each of those damages, and
Yep, you can double strike.
every
You can
creature
also...
gains it.
I'm sorry?
And every creature gains the poisonous.
Yes, every creature you have that poisonous. So if you can hit them 10 times with, like, one time with 10 creatures, or 5 creatures with double strike, that'll do it. And also, poisonous stacks. So if you can somehow get multiple instances of virulent sliver in play, that'll actually work too. Yeah, you can copy it, or if you're not playing Commander Singleton, you can just play multiple copies.
Mm-hmm.
Like in my Pauper deck, actually uses 4 copies of Virulent Sliver,
Yep.
Which very commonly that's a win condition. Is you just poke them and you have poisonous 3 or something, and all of a sudden they're just dead.
Yep. There's one. I think it might have been Mesmeric Sliver. Mills.
Yes, there is a mill one. I guess honestly, it only mills 1. Like all slivers gain the ability to tap target player mills 1. Technically, that is an all-win con. You're not wrong. That one is. It's so inefficient. But if you were doing the, oh, it's not Mesmeric. Mesmeric's the Fate Seal one.
Okay.
Which one's the mill one? Telekinetic, I think.
Maybe.
Yeah, or no, that's the tap one. Oh my gosh, I never used the mill one because he's terrible.
Yeah, I was just
anyway.
thinking in terms of like, okay, they're basically combat based, but what happens if you can't attack?
Yeah, you definitely have a few options. They have a lot of controlling options that people maybe don't expect. Now I'm trying to find out which one was the mill one. But anyways, yeah, the mill one does work if you were to do one of the queen combos, or if you just, even without a combo, if you're in like a stalemate of a game, you got a sliver queen or a brood sliver making lots of tokens, you can pretty reasonably mill somebody out that way. Do not remember the name of the mill one, but that's irrelevant. It's fine. They do have. Let me see. Which one is the name here? Yes, Psionic Sliver is another one. There's a couple of them that do direct damage. Psionic Sliver being one of them. It is all slivers have this creature tap. This creature deals 2 damage to any target and 3 damage to itself. It's an old. There's a few older slivers, or few older cards that have this kind of ability where they hit one thing and then they hit themselves harder. But with the many Anthem effects, they can usually live through that 3 damage to themselves, or if you have like a Hive Lord to make them indestructible, that kind of thing. And you can start to slowly ping people down with that. Or you have a Thorncaster, whenever a sliver attacks, it deals 1 damage to any target. That one, it's nice for just adding a little extra damage in there. It also works really nicely with Death Touch. Yeah, there's definitely a few that are like just kind of out of left field. Like some hand control ones, like Dementia Sliver is my favorite of the so-called bad ones.
Mm-hmm.
Where they all slivers gain tap, name a card. Target opponent reveals a card at random from their hand. And if it is the named card, they discard it. And you can only play this ability during your turn. This is definitely not a good effect. However, you can, if you've got a nice, fat board, you can just guess a card. And just start, slowly whittling away at people's hands.
Mm-hmm.
Which, that in itself isn't a win condition, but you start doing that and you're going to end up coming out on top.
Well, can you guess what my favorite way to use it would be? Unsummon Skull.
Yeah, that actually is a pretty good one. You bounce something and now you know for a fact what they have. And even if you guess wrong, they still have to reveal that card. Now you know one of them. So you just slowly start guessing away, and you either reveal their whole hand, and if you're lucky, you start discarding it.
Well, the second time you just name whatever you saw the first one.
Yep, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. Is you do that, and you'll start to slowly but surely whittle away at it. So again, that as far as alt win cons, that's not a win con, but they have a lot of ways that you can kind of control the battlefield in and get yourself basically what I'm trying to say set up to then follow through with a win.
I have a Simic Burn deck. That's another topic for another day. I love the deck though. But one of the
Simic Burn. I have mono green burn.
It is Simic Burn. What the deck does is it it uses evacuation plus Stormseeker or Black Vise. So
oh, interesting. I like that.
Bounce your board and then you take damage equal to your board plus your hand. But one of the cards I use in there is like my Tenderizer Burn is Thought Prison.
That one I'm not familiar with.
5 mana artifact, imprint. When it enters battlefield, you may have target player reveal their hand. If you do, choose a non-land card from it and exile that card. Whenever any player casts a spell that shares a color or a mana value with the imprinted card, it deals 2 damage to that player.
Interesting.
So it is one of the ways to do something like, okay, how do you get rid of an indestructible creature? Bounce it and exile it from your hand.
Yeah, definitely.
And then if there's a monocolor deck, Thought Prison, make sure I get a white card from it if you're a mono white deck, and now every time anybody casts a white spell, they're taken 2.
That's pretty clever. I've never seen this card before, and Mirrodin is like, I started in Onslaught, so I started right before Mirrodin came out. Mm-hmm. I feel like every other week I'm discovering a new card from Mirrodin that I've never heard of.
Yeah.
It's such a funny set.
Well, yeah, with Affinity, most cards just never got a chance to do anything.
This is really cool, though. Love it.
Prison, yeah. And that's my Simic Burn with Varel as the commander. But it functions pretty much the same way, which is, so reveal your hand, discard something, and this is a similar strategy of, okay, how do I know what to make you discard? Well, what if I put it there myself?
Yeah, definitely. There's so much good bounce stuff, too. You got, like, what is it, Aether Spouts, and...
Aether Spouts is tough, but, yeah.
I mean, it's not
Aether
perfect, but, like, or is it Aether Rise?
Yep.
Yeah, I would mix the two. But I'm a fan of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's my brand. I gotta know this stuff.
Funny you say that. I don't think there's any slivers that bounce, like, at all. They bounce themselves, like Hibernation Sliver and Frenetic Sliver. They bounce themselves, but I don't think there's a way to force an opponent's creature bounced. Funny you say that.
Well, there are ways that aren't the slivers themselves. Like there are cards where if you deal combat damage to a player, return a card.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely ways outside of it, and you're in 5 colors with slivers 99% of the time, so you definitely have access to all that.
But yeah, no ways to bounce opponent boards, but that might be a good thing because the one-sided evacuations are just it wins the game.
Oh, they're brutal. They're too much.
Washout is one of my favorite Magic cards because it allows you to wipe someone's board and continue being aggressive.
I'm trying to remember which one is Washout. The one where you choose a color? Yeah.
Choose a color, bounce everything other color. So that allows me in blue aggressive decks to continue attacking without affecting my own board.
Yeah, that's brutal. It sort of reminds me of River's Rebuke, where you just get to mess up one person really bad.
This case, you can actually hit multiple.
Yeah, this one definitely can hit multiple. So this is probably better. Although, I guess River's Rebuke hits multicolored decks a little better. So they just both do different things in a similar way.
Yeah, you just got to be careful to name the right color, but if it's a multicolored deck, you're probably still going to get some overlap.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So,
Actually, while
yeah.
we're on the topic of alt win cons, I just remembered, nearly forgot. There's a new or newish alternate win con came out with Modern Horizons. There's Spiteful Sliver, and this is basically like the Boros Reckoner combo. This one gives all slivers you control the effect of when it is dealt damage, you deal that same amount of damage to any player or planeswalker.
Yeah, that's what I don't see
And you
often
can,
enough in stuffy decks.
yeah, Spiteful Sliver is really cool. Even just by himself, like you get that nice little effect. But if you play him in a Sliver deck, you've got 10 Slivers on the board. All of a sudden, Blasphemous Act wins you the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like I run Blasphemous Act in mine. You don't typically want to run too many board wipes because you know your entire plan is I want to play a lot of creatures. But I play Blasphemous Act because sometimes you just gotta have a board wipe.
Yeah.
And this particular one combos with Spiteful Sliver in such an amazing way.
Also, if you made your creatures on indestructible, they don't care about it.
Yep, that's exactly the other reason. That's why I choose it over, say, a Merciless Eviction or something. Is because I have Sliver Hive Lord to give them indestructible. I've got Cryptid Sliver that gives them the ability to regenerate. Plenty of ways where you can give Ward Sliver and make them protection from red so they don't take damage. Like you've got lots of ways to play around a Blasphemous Act on your own side. Whereas a lot of board wipes, like again Merciless Eviction or any of the like bounce the board type of things, I wouldn't really want to play them here in a 5-color Sliver deck because there's less ways to play around those effects.
Have you considered Kindred dominance?
I considered it. My copy is in my bear deck right now.
Okay.
It is actually pretty cool. I do play Kindred Discovery. Really, all the Kindred cards are so good, but Kindred Dominance definitely a cool card. It is a high mana, I must say, but I'm a fan of it.
Yeah, another one could be Harsh Mercy, and that one is actually pretty cheap. The problem is it does allow each player to protect a type.
I had to look up that one. Yeah, I've seen this before. This is definitely a good one. Right now, as far as board wipes go, I play Blasphemous Act and Austere Command, and that one I like because I don't have to hit creatures, but then when I do occasionally have to hit creatures, I have at least a little bit of control over it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I just realized you said Kindred Dominance. That's the black one, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I don't actually own a copy of that one.
Okay.
Which one's the green one? Kindred.
I don't remember.
Whatever the green one is, that summons. Kindred summons.
Okay.
That's the one that's in my bear deck.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Bear green.
Yeah, I was thinking green black bears. Yeah, Kindred dominance is just a board wipe.
Yeah, that's the board wipe.
It protects your type.
That's definitely something I've considered. I just don't own one.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little pricey nowadays.
Yeah.
Sitting around $20+.
Mm-hmm.
Now, don't get me, my Sliver deck is pricey, but that's partly because I've been collecting for so long, and I've had this deck for years and years.
I mean, for 2 more, you could also go with Ingarrick's Wake.
I do like Ingarrick's Wake a lot.
The Plague Wind.
Something to think about, but I just it's a lot of mana. That's the main thing. But as with a deck like this, if you're gonna play board wipes, you definitely do want to play things like that because you don't want to be hitting your own side. You're so dependent on getting a big board out. Like that's the one weakness. Whenever I play with people and they ask, well, how do I beat this? This is crazy. I tell them play more board wipes. Board wipe, board wipe, board wipe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's you can only recover from board wipes so often. Like I do have a Patriarch's Bidding. Finally got reprinted recently.
Oh yeah.
Or I used to run what's it called? Eerie Ultimatum, which brings all your stuff back from the grave.
Living Death.
From extinction. Yeah, Living Death. That's an option. I like Living Death a lot. You have ways to get back from board wipes, but really there's only like so many ways to do that, and you can only do it so many times.
There are about 10 ways now. So I have a deck. I call it Tree Cycling. It's my Colfanor, the Last U cycling deck. And basically, the deck is designed around using cycling creatures to keep your hand loaded and to keep filtering through your deck, till eventually you get to a living death effect and bring them all back.
That's pretty cool. Like that.
So there are about 10 of them now.
Yeah, there's definitely a few ways to get through it. The issue is if you're including too many of those, then you're diluting the rest of your deck. So you really got to find that balance.
Oh, that's a cool one. I think it's from. I didn't really pay much attention to the Nordic set when it came out. Kaldheim? Crippling Fear.
Yeah. Crippling Fear is the creatures that aren't the choice that you pick is like -3, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that one, and there's actually another. Shoot, what is the name? Something Voyage. What is the card? Haunting Voyage.
Mm-hmm.
It's a foretell card. You don't have to foretell it, but it's if you foretell it, you get an extra effect. So it's choose a creature type, and you either return 2 of that type from your grave to the battlefield, which is pretty good for 6 mana, or if it was foretold where it's going to pay an extra mana for doing this, you get all creatures of that type to the battlefield. So definitely a nice anti-board wipe. Something I've considered. I went with Patriarch's Bidding because it's less mana, and it does basically the same thing. It does work for your opponents as well, but I feel like I'm okay with that just because I can usually overrun them, I feel. Although it's definitely dangerous if your opponents are also playing tribal decks, I gotta say.
When I mentioned like multiple like different effects for this, I'm not necessarily saying replace what's already in there. When I build decks, since it's maybe just the way that I build them, and I am going to start a deck, a deck tech series on YouTube soon. But I try to find a lot of similar effects. So like my decks will have between 5 and 10 board wipes. They'll have depending on how defensive they are. They'll have about the 10 ramp, 10 card draw, 10 spot removal. They have like they all look different, and they all do it in whatever unique way they're going to do it.
Yep.
But I like having a lot of the same effect rather than tutors, because that way I can assure that if there's something I want to see, I'm going to see it. So I'm talking about different cards that do the same thing. Yeah. So I'm talking about different cards that do the same thing. Maybe you want more than 2 to 3 board wipes in a deck like that, and so trying to find other board wipes that don't touch your board. I might also consider something like, in terms of a board wipe that allows you to continue to be aggressive and doesn't affect your board at all. I usually like just with the random mana that I wind up having left over if you can't be mana efficient every turn. Sometimes something like Settle the Wreckage. Out of a Sliver deck, that's going to catch people by surprise.
I'm a big fan of Settle the Wreckage. Love that card. My side note, my favorite little tidbit about Settle the Wreckage is you can get that thing with Sunforger.
Oh yeah, I have. So this is actually one of my stream games with my the previous version of my Vadrock deck. I used to have a Vadrock Planeswalker deck, and I turned it into a burn deck, but I used Tibalt to Insurrection everyone's board, the 2 mana Tibalt, because I can get that back with Vadrock. And I Insurrectioned everyone's board, attacked them with their own creatures, and then post-combat, or not post-combat, post-damage settled.
That's brutal.
Yep. That was a lovely turn. So
that is ridiculous. I love it.
So I got to super ramp and hit them with their own creatures. And people say Tibalt's bad.
Tibalt's funny.
I love Tibalt. I have a Tibalt Oathbreaker deck too. 2 mana Tibalt with Erratic Explosion. And then you can just make an Oathbreaker deck that's 2 mana Tibalt, Erratic Explosion, and then Draco, and 57 mountains. Basically, every 2 turns, you hit somebody for 16.
That's brutal. I love it. That's actually, that's one of those meme decks where, like, in Commander it doesn't work, but in Oathbreaker with 20 life, that's pretty decent.
Yeah, and with the extra information that you have with, or the extra the cards that you have access to, yeah, you're using the mana severance effect to get them to make that happen. Speaking of mana severance, you can also go treasure hunt or mana severance with the Jace that wins the game. The Jace that wins the game, if you have no, you would draw and can't. And you put that Jace out.
I got a friend that had that deck.
You put a Jace out, then you cast Mana Severance and activate Jace and win.
Yep. Yeah, he played that deck one time, and I didn't tell. I knew what was coming, but I didn't tell the rest of the table because I thought it'd be kind of funny. But then after that, he has never ever made that happen ever again because we all just were like, all right, we know what you're doing. We're just gonna kill you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where you start putting in some things just to mess with people. Like my version of the Draco deck that I was talking about has some other thing. It has some Eldrazi that shuffle themselves. It has Blasphemous Act, some other cards that are actually castable.
Sure. And then they're still big, chunky spells to hit. That's pretty good.
Yeah, so you can randomly just kill somebody with an Eldrazi too.
I love it. You can eventually cast one, maybe.
Yeah.
Actually, we're going off topic again, but as far as Oathbreaker, I only have 2 decks, and one of them is Ugin Eldrazi. That's pretty fun with all this dust that does the spell.
Well, as far as Oathbreaker and some of the self-promotion, so on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/unsummoned we do Oathbreaker it's now Thursday. There are sign-ups in the skull symbol for it. And those, so I keep the VODs every time I stream, and so the Oathbreaker VODs are being made into a video series. An Oathbreaker gameplay series. Trying to grow that community.
More Oathbreaker content. Always happy to see that.
Yep. And if you're ever interested, you can always be on that too.
Heck yeah. Definitely interested. I don't get to play my Oathbreaker decks enough.
Yeah, every Thursday we're always looking for people.
Sweet.
All right.
I'll have to find a way to build Slivers in Oathbreaker. I'll find a way. I'll make it happen.
Oh yeah. Well, you could go. You can go with.
To do like 3 colors or something.
Like a 3-color version. Probably Temur, I think, is the only way that you can do it with green. Probably the best way to
Temur or
run it.
Jund. Wait, is there a Jund?
Yeah.
Windgrace, I guess?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound very
Or
useful,
you can go with rule zeroing, and there was somebody I think talked about it before. I rule 0 deck with Urza, because Urza is a rule 0 5-color. My rule 0 with the Urza Planeswalker is I call it Lucky Charms, because it's all cascades and all 10 of the guild charms and all 10 of the 3 mana charms.
I love that. It's like a Ramos deck, kind of.
Well, kind of. I have no idea what the deck's going to do at any time. The only little bit of control I have over the deck is in the signature spell, which is it's a green-white card that allows me to take a multicolored card from the grave and put it back in my hand. So the only control.
Conflux.
No,
right?
that takes them out of the deck.
You're right. Yeah, I don't remember which card you're talking about.
Yeah, it's green and white, I believe, sorcery that allows me to put a card from my graveyard into my hand. And so that's the only bit of control I have, and even then, it's only after I've already done something.
That sounds like fun, though.
I won a game by bringing back Boros Charm and giving a creature double strike before.
Gosh, the last time I played, I died to Boros. Somebody Boros charmed an opponent's creature. This Toski that was at like 20. And I was just like, yeah, I could take it. And then they Boros charmed it, and I died to I was like, I forgot you could even do that. You could Boros charm an enemy creature. But yeah, they got me. Pretty good. Well, so funny you're talking about random Oathbreaker deck. So going back to Slivers, back to the main topic here, I haven't actually talked about my deck at all. So earlier, I mentioned that I don't play, for example, Screeching Sliver, the tap to mill, or I don't play Plague Sliver because he hurts me. He's an anti-Sliver. I don't play a lot of these like not very good ones. I don't play Dementia Sliver, the one where you look at an opponent's card at random from their hand. But that's not strictly true. I actually do play all of these. My Sliver deck is something that I've never seen anyone do before. I'm very proud of it. I've recently put together a build where I can play every single Sliver in my decks. And so what I do, I learned this because of somebody on the command zone talked about this. They talked about their friend who had a Mael of the Anima deck. And so what Mael does is you get big creatures for free, basically. And so what they did was they built a pile of like 50 of their favorite big creatures. And every game they would just randomly shuffle in like 25 of them or something. And I was like, that's a really cool idea. So what my Sliver deck does is I take the 5 legendary Slivers, First Sliver, Legion, Queen, Overlord, and Hive Lord. I shuffle them up, and I let somebody pick one at random, and boom, there's my commander. And I shuffle the other 4 into the deck. And then I have the pile of, I believe it's 111 at this point, other Slivers. I shuffle them all up, and I take 30 of them, and they go in the deck. And I don't know what they're going to be until I start.
Nice.
And then the rest of the deck is 60-ish, I think 64 cards, or I'd have to count them, I don't remember right now. Ramp and card draw and removal and just, generic tribal cards like Kindred Discovery and Herald's Horn and that kind of thing. Just to have like a functioning deck, and then a land base, of course, a 5-color land base. And so every time I play this deck, it's different. I never know what it's going to be, and it's my way of being able to play all of the Slivers, because there's just too many that you can't physically put them all in a deck.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. That makes me sad. They all deserve love.
Yeah, maybe one of these days they'll allow you to increase your deck size past 100, so you can play with Battle of Wits or
oh my gosh,
or Yorion as a companion.
Yeah. If they ever did that, I'm pretty sure I would actually just have a 200 card deck with not for Battle of Wits, but for every single Sliver. But then to still have a functioning deck, I'd have to increase the number of lands and whatever too.
Oh yeah.
I would definitely have a giant pile. It'd be awful.
Oh.
But yeah, I play them all. I play like Metallic Sliver, which is a 1-mana, 1/1 artifact creature. It doesn't do anything. It's part of the story where Volrath was trying to spy on the Slivers to understand them, so he made an artificial one. Or I play like Venser's Sliver, which is at one point in the story, Venser like tries to understand them, and he also makes an artifact creature version. Things like that. Like they don't do anything. They're useless. I still play them because I think they're cool. And sometimes it means my deck ends up being subpar. That's not really the point. I'm okay with that. And it is one thing, since Slivers have this, stigma that everybody hates them. Or maybe not everybody, but you know what I mean. They're one of those tribes where it's just like, oh, here comes the Sliver guy, and everybody rolls their eyes.
Yeah.
But this is one of those ways where I can have a powerful deck, because the base skeleton of the removal and the ramp and the card draw and everything is still pretty good, I think. It's definitely there. So a powerful deck, but not necessarily overbearingly powerful. I might, if I'm lucky, end up with something crazy. I might end up with something really bad. I've had games where I had to win by just sitting there and blocking with Sliver Queen tokens forever because I had nothing else to do, and then eventually I was able to put something together. Sometimes I'll end up with like, oh, my opening hand is, Scuttling Sliver, which is Slivers have the ability to pay 2 mana and untap themselves. Not that great. But you get some interesting combos. You get to do some fun stuff with that. You know, maybe that scuttling Sliver all of a sudden becomes okay because you can mill them multiple cards every turn with or Screeching Sliver or what have you. So it's definitely a fun way to play a little bit of variety. And yeah, to have a Sliver deck that's not as mean. And if I ever want to, I can play the mean version. All I have to do is choose the commander that I want and choose the 30 Slivers that I prefer, and boom, I have my good deck, so-called good deck. I can't even remember the last time I played it that way.
It reminds me a bit of what I did when I wanted to start enjoying Oathbreaker again, because originally when I got into Oathbreaker, I started trying to make like modern, like Oathbreaker versions of modern decks. And I wanted to see what could port over. And I started doing a little bit of stress testing to see, okay, what would it look like, or what would this archetype look like in Oathbreaker? But then I started going into, okay, the deck that I found the most fun, that gave me the most joy, was the Cascade deck, where I had no control over what was going to happen. And I knew it was going to be something interesting, but I had no idea what it was going to be. So I started making... I made a Saheeli polymorph deck. And then I made a Tezzeret Shape Anew deck. So even though I knew what was in the deck, I didn't know what was coming next.
Right.
I didn't have a way of controlling it.
Yeah, definitely similar. And even when I'm playing my so-called good version, my favorite commander is the first Sliver, the one that has Cascade, and gives all your Sliver spells Cascade, because it's this, like, keyword roulette, I guess you could say. That's what I like to call it. It was like, am I going to have trample? Am I going to have flying? Am I going to have haste? Who knows? We're going to find out.
I guess one of the lessons to take away would be, if you're finding your deck is kind of repetitive or boring or is seen negatively by the table, then try to find some aspect that you can't control.
Yeah.
And see if you can maximize that.
Yeah, increasing variance, I think, is definitely the way to go in terms of spicing up your games. Like, I take out all my tutors. The only tutors I'm playing are the ones that are literally, like, built into Slivers, which is Overlord and Homing Sliver. They're the only two, I think, off the top of my head. And I guess technically, if you want to count like Cultivate as a tutor, but nobody says that. Yeah, I have a Demonic Tutor. I could be playing a Demonic Tutor in here. I choose not to because I find it boring. I actually don't have it in any decks right now.
Let me get into the debate about tutors. For me, I would play tutors in a deck that's particularly ambitious and silly. Like, I'm trying to do something, but Wizards hasn't printed enough copies of it yet.
Definitely, yeah.
And basically, I impose restrictions on what I'm willing to search up with the tutor. For example, I have a Suicide Selenia deck. I talked about a few different places. So the deck is designed to use Selenia's ability to pay my entire life total with a Lich out. Or a Lich type effect, so it says I don't lose and I get to 0, and then swap life totals.
Okay, that's pretty clever. I like that.
So,
I've heard of Selenia deck, I've never seen one.
Well, there's different ways to build it. On one of the episodes on MJ's podcast, talked about how 3 different people would look at that card and see 3 completely different things. I focused on the loss of life aspect. He focused on the flying and power and toughness aspect. We said that I think Peter, Mono White Border, would focus on the creature type of angel and the fact that it has a white pip.
Yeah. Yeah, she's one of the ways to play a black-white angel with all the black angels for Kaldheim. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so somebody might build an angel tribal deck. Somebody might build a mid-range deck with just using her as a creature that can protect herself. And then I would look at that and see combo.
Yep.
because I'm a natural combo player, if you couldn't quite tell. And the fact that we talked about Storm, 5-color Storm,
Yeah.
5-color elementals, a deck that mass board wipes somebody and then hits them in the face with it. I am very much a combo player, not hugely into combat. But
I definitely I have a few combo decks, but I'm a combat person at heart. I like to bonk people to death.
I'm not opposed to that, and I like that that gets people closer and closer and closer. The reason why I'm sort of non-combat for the most part is because when I started playing, it was Champions of Kamigawa. So there was Umezawa shit. There was also Damage on the Stack, Modular, Mog Fanatic Shenanigans.
At that time?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It was still on the stack for about another 5 to 7 years after that.
What? Holy heck.
So I didn't understand combat at all. So my first deck that I had some success with was a grinding station deck, where I just milled people with 0 costing artifacts. They're like, you know what? I don't understand how combat works. I understand that if I don't do anything, you're going to kill me by X turn. So I'm just going to see if I can mill you faster.
I love it.
The worst part is it was multiplayer, and so...
Oh, yeah.
I was just...
Now you have to mill an extra few hundred cards.
I was just gunning for the one guy. And then figured, okay, I can play politically and maneuver my way into a positive situation with the remaining players if I'm the one who takes them out.
Like, hey, I'm helping you all. Kill me last.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then you're hoping to put something together in that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're talking about tutors, and basically I would see Demonic Tutor in the Selenia deck as an 8-mana Axis of Mortality.
Sure, yeah, because there's not a lot of ways to swap the life.
Yep.
Like, in existence, let alone in those.
Yeah, there are about 8 of them. And so I have a couple of tutors in there as basically adding a couple mana to whatever the thing is I want to tutor. Or whatever the thing is that I want.
Yeah. I definitely don't have anything against tutors. I guess I'm just trying to say, for those who, they're finding their games to becoming too samey. Mm-hmm. We always do the same thing the same way every time. Cut the tutors. Yes, the first step. Or also, the other hand, if you're thinking, I'm trying to power my decks down, my decks are too strong for my group, cut the tutors. That's like the first thing I usually see.
Cut the tutor and add an additional card of whatever it is that you're trying to do with the deck. So you figure out, okay, how is the deck trying to win? And you add an additional card of however it is it's trying to win. Maybe the effect if you can, or just something else, like maybe... let's say that I wanted to change my Selenia deck so that it could win a slightly different way. Maybe I'd put in Death Shadow.
Sure, yeah. That's a good one. Death Shadow's a cool card.
Yep. Well, and you'll never see that in Commander unless you're doing something like...
you gotta be doing shenanigans.
Yeah. Putting a Lich out, setting yourself to 0, paying as much life as you want from Selenia, because it's loss of life and not damage. Mm-hmm. And then attacking somebody with a ridiculously large Death Shadow seems like fun if I don't want to just tutor for swapping the life total. Some people don't necessarily like the life total swaps because they feel it's a little anticlimactic. So, you know what? You got a chance to block.
Death Shadow's I almost played him in a different deck. I have a Skullbriar deck, and in that deck, I am playing Viral's the Scarstriped. It gives all of your creatures in your graveyard scavenge, where scavenge is equal to their mana cost. So the trick is you scavenge your Death Shadow for a single mana to add plus 13 power.
Yep.
Which is pretty cool. It ended up not making the cut because It's not exactly the most consistent setup when Virals is not in the command zone, but it's a cool little trick you can do.
Yeah.
But yeah, Skullbriar, that's one of my other favorite decks, but totally different conversation. It's actually the opposite of Slivers. Skullbriar is get one single creature and give him all the abilities and all of the counters, whereas Slivers is you're going wide with lots of creatures and doing the same thing, but in a very different way.
Absolutely. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about Slivers on this episode?
Well, just I suppose I touched on this briefly, but one of those things where people they have that stigma, they're so dangerous and scary, and I'm not trying to downplay that. They're definitely dangerous and scary. Tips to beat them, though, people, play more board wipes. Board wipe these guys. Take them out. Granted, that's not always the perfect solution when they have regenerate and indestructible and what have you. You're going to need to play a little spot removal for those guys first. It's not a perfect solution, but board wipes are the big answer. If you can keep them from playing out a lot of creatures, definitely you'll keep them in check. That said, they're not that scary until they get rolling. If the Sliver play only has like 2 creatures out, and it's like, okay, they have First Strike and Trample, but they're 2/2s, it's probably okay. Don't need to hate them out, at least just yet. There are other players at the table. This is possibly me projecting a little bit here, but it's like, the first time I ever played my Sliver deck, I had just obtained it. I bought my original deck off of a friend who didn't want the deck anymore, and I started with it. First time I ever played it. I am getting focused on by 2 other players while a Narset player is comboing off infinitely. And I'm like, you guys, look across the table. Look at what he's doing. I have First Strike. Why do you care?
Yeah, threat assessment is important. I would say if you're so on the flip side, if you're looking to play Slivers, you might want to talk with your table about it first.
Definitely be ready to be hated out.
Yeah, yes and no.
And often deservedly, but not always.
Yes and no. So, for example, within the play group on the skull symbol, one of the signups that we have is for Saturdays. We play Salty Saturday. That's when you play the deck that you feel will make people salty, or you play whatever you want, regardless of people's feelings.
Right. That's where the Urza decks come out.
Yeah. But that's also where, play Slivers. Play it as ridiculously powerful as you want, or as crazy and chaotic as you want. Nobody focuses too much on anybody. We're there to play decks that make each other salty intentionally. Because I'm not sure everybody's going to bring those kinds of power decks to the table. Spend the kind of money on it that they're spending.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Sometimes, that's, speaking of money, that is one thing. If you're interested in Slivers, be ready to spend a little bit. Yeah. You can to an extent make I'm going to say it with air quotes here, budget build. But if you're trying to do the full gamut, like what I've got going here, it's going to cost you a lot. 5-color mana base alone is a fair amount, but then also the Slivers themselves. Overlord is $30+ for the version, the Secret Lair version, which I think is the cheapest one. Legion is, I know it went down with that reprint recently in Time Spiral Remastered. It's around 20. A lot of the Hive Lord is 20 something, and then a lot of the other older ones. Magma Sliver is 18 right now. Gale Rider Sliver that gets them all flying, that's $10. And so on and so forth. And then, of course, the infamous one, Sliver Queen, she's around $400 right now. That's going to cost you a lot. Thankfully, I bought my Sliver Queen many years ago for $40. And she's just been slowly climbing up in price thanks to new Sliver cards.
Yeah.
So word of advice to be ready to spend a little. Yeah, the reserve list is the problem. She is one of those reserve list cards. Little trivia: Sliver Queen is the first 5-color card, actually.
Mm-hmm.
She's the first one. I love that little fun piece of knowledge.
Yep.
But yeah, so I wholeheartedly recommend them if you're interested in them. I think they're very cool, very fun, very easy to build in a style that you like. You can put in all your favorite keywords or abilities. You can play them as like an anthem sort of tribe, or you can go combo, or you could go just full aggro with cool abilities. There's so much cool stuff that they can do. They're very, very customizable.
Mm-hmm.
And being in 5 colors means you have access to whatever your favorite stuff is, whether you want to go with tribal effects or just good stuff. It's all available to you.
Absolutely. All right, so this has been Unsummoned Skull, joined by
Hamburger Time.
Right, do you want to give any of your socials or where people can find you?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter @_Hamburger Time. I talk about a lot of Magic stuff, Yu-Gi-Oh stuff, because that's actually my job. I suppose I should have mentioned that. I actually am a Yu-Gi-Oh coverage writer. That's what I do professionally, or one of my things on the side. So for Konami's online coverage blog for their tournaments, if you're ever at a Yu-Gi-Oh event, probably see me there. There's a decent chance.
Oh, neat.
So I talk about Yu-Gi-Oh stuff a lot on Twitter. Talk a lot about Magic, because I actually play Commander more often than Yu-Gi-Oh, just because Commander is a multiplayer format,
Mm-hmm.
and I really enjoy that. I talk about Smash Bros a lot, because I'm a TO and a competitor here in SoCal. And some just whatever other stuff that I want to do. All kinds of fun stuff on there.
Nice.
Yeah. So @_Hamburger Time, that's my Twitter handle. That's probably the best way to follow me. I have other stuff, but I never use them.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to hearing more about the awesomeness that you're doing, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
You have a good one.
Thank you.